The late summer sun dipped low over the sprawling expanse of Willow Bend Plains, Montana, in the fading days of 1879, painting the endless grasslands in a warm, golden glow that shimmered like liquid amber. A restless breeze swept through the valley, rustling the tall blades of clover and sage, and carrying with it the faint, earthy scent of the distant Yellowstone River as it carved its way through the rugged terrain. The Bitterroot Mountains loomed on the horizon, their jagged peaks dusted with the first hints of autumn frost, standing as silent sentinels over a land both beautiful and unforgiving. Marcus Sullivan guided his chestnut mare, Daisy, along a narrow, winding trail that cut through the plains. His weathered leather hat tipped low to shield his piercing blue eyes from the sun's dying rays. At 52, Marcus was a man forged by the harsh realities of the frontier, tall and lean, with a rugged jawline shadowed by a week's worth of stubble, and hands calloused from years of breaking the earth and taming cattle. His sandy blonde hair, streaked with threads of gray, was tied back with a thin leather cord, and a faded navy blue scarf hung loosely around his neck, its frayed edges fluttering in the wind, a cherished keepsake from his late wife, Sarah, and a reminder of a life that now felt like a half-forgotten dream. Marcus had poured his heart into Whispering Pines Ranch, a modest homestead nestled in a quiet clearing, where the grasslands met a grove of ancient pines. He'd built it with visions of a thriving cattle business, of wide pastures filled with lowing herds and a family to share in the laughter that would echo through its sturdy cedar walls. But those dreams had withered like the wildflowers in a drought. 4 years ago, a merciless winter fever swept through the valley, stealing Sarah and their newborn daughter Abigail in the span of a single cruel week. The loss carved a hollow space in Marcus's chest, one that no amount of hard work or whiskey could fill. The ranch, once a beacon of hope and promise, had become a mausoleum of memories, its empty rooms whispering echoes of Sarah's gentle voice and Abigail's fleeting cries. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind through the cracked windows, seemed to mock him with what he'd lost. Marcus told himself he was riding into Willow Bend to buy a new plow blade. His old one had snapped clean in half while clearing a rocky patch for winter rye. But the truth weighed heavier than the saddlebags slung across Daisy's back. He was running, fleeing the ghosts that haunted his every step, desperate for a few hours of reprieve from the suffocating loneliness that clung to him like a second skin. Willow Bend came into view as Marcus crested a low rise, the town sprawling across the valley floor like a patchwork quilt stitched together with hope and grit. Wooden storefronts lined the dusty main street, their hand-painted signs swaying lazily in the breeze. Willow General Store with its barrels of molasses and flour stacked out front. Carter's Saloon, where the faint strains of a piano drifted through open doors, and the blacksmith shop where the rhythmic clang of hammer on iron rang out like the heartbeat of the frontier. Smoke curled from chimneys, blending with the golden haze of dusk, and the air buzzed with the familiar sounds of frontier life. The creak of wagon wheels, the laughter of children chasing a stray dog, and the low murmur of townsfolk bartering over goods. Marcus dismounted outside the general store, his boots kicking up small clouds of dust as he tethered Daisy to a hitching post with a practiced knot. The familiar scent of fresh hay, leather, and sweet molasses greeted him as he stepped onto the creaking boardwalk, his broad shoulders casting a long shadow across the weathered planks. He adjusted the brim of his hat, ready to barter with Old Man Carter for the plow blade, when a sharp, pained cry sliced through the evening air, stopping him dead in his tracks. Across the street, near the swinging doors of Carter's Saloon, a young woman stood trembling, her slender frame hunched as if bracing for a storm. Victoria Hayes was barely 19, with a delicate heart-shaped face that might have been beautiful, if not for the exhaustion etched into every line. Her pale skin was dusted with a scattering of freckles across her nose, and her wide emerald green eyes shimmered with unshed tears, reflecting the fading sunlight like polished jade. Her auburn hair fell in messy waves down her back, pinned haphazardly with a wooden hairpin carved with a tiny daisy, a small, fragile token of better days long gone. She wore a faded green dress, its hem frayed and patched at the knees, and scuffed black boots that looked 2 sizes too big, the leather cracked from years of wear. A tattered gray shawl was draped over her shoulders, slipping slightly to reveal a fresh red welt on her right forearm, the angry mark of a recent blow. Her lips quivered as she shrank back, her hands clutching the shawl like a lifeline, and Marcus's gaze caught another bruise blooming across her collarbone, a sickly yellow-green that spoke of older, deeper pain. Towering over her was Luther, Blackwood, the saloon's owner, a man whose very presence seemed to drain the warmth from the air. Lean and wiry, with a hawkish nose and cold black eyes that glinted with malice, Luther's thin mustache curled above his lips like a perpetual sneer. He wore a black gambler's hat tilted at a jaunty angle, a pristine gray suit that looked out of place in the rugged town, and a silver ring on his right hand that caught the light ominously as he raised it. His voice was a low, venomous growl as he spat words that cut deeper than any blade. "You clumsy little fool. Spill another tray and I'll take it out of your hide. You think I keep you around for your pretty face?" Victoria flinched at his words, her shawl slipping further as she stepped back, her body tensing as if expecting the blow that seemed inevitable. Her knuckles whitened as she gripped the shawl tighter, her emerald eyes darting to the ground, unable to meet Luther's gaze. Marcus felt a fire ignite deep in his gut, a righteous anger that burned hotter than the Montana sun. He'd seen, too, much cruelty in his years on the frontier, men who preyed on the weak, who broke spirits as easily as they broke horses, leaving nothing but shattered shells in their wake. The sight of Victoria, so young and fragile yet carrying the weight of a lifetime of pain, stirred something in him he thought he'd buried with Sarah and Abigail. It was the same protective instinct that had once driven him to build a home, to fight for a future, to believe in something better. Without a second thought, his boots struck the boardwalk with a heavy, deliberate thud, each step echoing with purpose as he crossed the street in long strides. His voice boomed like thunder rolling over the plains, cutting through the tension like a blade. "That's enough, Blackwood." Luther froze, his hand still raised, his cold eyes narrowing as he turned to face Marcus, a smirk twisting his lips like a coiled snake ready to strike. But Marcus wasn't here for games. What would this hardened rancher risk to save a stranger who reminded him so much of the family he'd lost? The twilight deepened over Willow Bend Plains as Marcus Sullivan and Victoria Hayes rode away from the fading lights of town, the Montana sky unfolding above them in a breathtaking sweep of indigo, speckled with stars that twinkled like scattered fireflies. A gentle breeze rustled through the grasslands, carrying the faint scent of sage and the distant murmur of the Yellowstone River as it wound through the valley. Marcus guided his chestnut mare Daisy along the trail with a steady hand, her hooves kicking up small clouds of dust that shimmered in the starlight. Victoria sat behind him, her slender arms wrapped loosely around his waist, her touch hesitant, as if she feared taking up too much space. Her auburn hair, still pinned with that daisy-carved hairpin, brushed against his shoulder, the messy waves catching the moonlight, and Marcus could feel the faint tremble in her frame, a lingering echo of the fear Luther Blackwood had instilled in her. Marcus's navy blue scarf fluttered against his chest, a cherished keepsake from Sarah that had once brought him comfort in the darkest days. Tonight, though, the ache of her memory felt different, less like a weight and more like a quiet call to action, urging him to protect the fragile soul clinging to him now. He'd acted on instinct at the saloon, stepping in to shield Victoria from Luther's cruelty. But as they rode toward Whispering Pines Ranch, the gravity of his decision settled over him. He'd offered her a choice: stay with a man who'd break her spirit, or come with him to a place where no hand would be. Raised in anger, Victoria had chosen to leave, her emerald green eyes flickering with a spark of hope so faint it might have been a trick of the starlight. But Marcus wondered if he could truly give her the sanctuary she needed to heal. "You holding up all right, back there?" Marcus asked, his voice low and steady, cutting through the rhythmic clop of Daisy's hooves. Victoria's grip tightened briefly, and he felt her nod against his back, her voice a soft whisper. "Yes, sir. I'm all right." Her words were fragile, like the first spring buds after a long winter, and Marcus sensed the years of fear behind them. "Just Marcus," he corrected gently, glancing over his shoulder. "No need for sir out here." She nodded again, a small movement, but he caught the faintest hint of relief in her posture, as if shedding that formality was the first step toward something new. The trail climbed a gentle rise, and Whispering Pines Ranch came into view, nestled in a clearing where the grasslands met a grove of towering pines, their needles whispering softly in the night breeze. The main house stood sturdy, built from cedar logs and riverstone, its wraparound porch facing the vast plains, lit by a single lantern that cast a warm golden glow across the weathered boards. A small barn sat off to the side, its roof sagging from neglect, and a fenced pasture stretched toward the horizon, empty now but for a few grazing horses. The ranch had once been Marcus's pride, a testament to the life he'd built with Sarah. But without her, it had become a shadow of its former self, functional but hollow like a song with no melody. Marcus dismounted and helped Victoria down, his hands steady as he supported her. She moved carefully, as if every step might bring pain, her faded green dress clinging to her thin frame, her scuffed black boots leaving faint prints in the dust. She clutched her tattered gray shawl tighter, her emerald green eyes wide as she took in the ranch, the starlit plains stretching out like an endless canvas. "It's beautiful," she murmured, her voice tinged with awe, as if she couldn't believe such a place existed, or that she was allowed to be part of it. "It's home," Marcus replied, the word feeling strange after years of solitude. He led her up the porch steps, the lantern light catching the freckles on her nose, and pushed open the cedar door. Inside, the house was clean but sparse, with a stone fireplace dominating one wall, its hearth cold and dark. A scarred wooden table sat in the center, flanked by 2 chairs, and a narrow hallway led to the bedrooms. The air smelled of pine and leather, but there was a stillness to the place, a quiet that spoke of absence. Marcus showed Victoria to a small room down the hall, its walls lined with cedar and a single window overlooking the pasture. A narrow bed with a faded blue and yellow quilt stood against one wall, and a washstand held a chipped basin and pitcher. "This is yours," Marcus said, setting her cloth bundle on the quilt. "Water's in the pitcher, privy's out back. You need anything, just holler." Victoria nodded, her fingers tracing the quilt's edge as if testing its reality. "Thank you, Marcus," she said softly, her voice trembling with gratitude. "You're safe here, Victoria." "That's a promise," Marcus said, his blue eyes steady as they met hers. A flicker of hope crossed her face, and Marcus felt a responsibility settle over him, heavy but right. "I'll get supper ready," he added, stepping out. In the kitchen, he lit the stove, the flames casting a warm glow, and warmed a pot of venison stew, the aroma of meat and herbs filling the air. Victoria soon appeared, her shawl draped over her shoulders, her auburn hair catching the firelight, a cautious curiosity in her expression. They ate in silence, the clink of spoons, a comforting sound. Victoria savored each bite, her shoulders relaxing with every moment. "This is good," she said, her voice stronger. "My mother made stew like this, before she passed." Marcus nodded, his gaze softening. This was Sarah's recipe. "Lost her and our little girl 4 years back to fever." Victoria's eyes filled with empathy. "I'm sorry," she whispered. And they shared a quiet understanding, 2 hearts touched by loss finding solace in each other's presence. On the porch later, under a glittering sky, Marcus pointed out the barn and a patch of wildflowers, goldenrod, and lupine. "Tomorrow you can tend those flowers if you're up for it," he said. "But tonight rest." Victoria's eyes shimmered in the starlight. "I don't know how to thank you," she said, her voice trembling. "You don't owe me a thing," Marcus replied firmly. "You're here because it's right." But as the stars watched over them, what hidden wounds would Victoria bring to light in this new sanctuary? The first light of dawn crept over the Bitterroot Mountains, painting the Willow Bend Plains in shades of soft pink and gold, as if the sky itself was waking with a gentle promise. At Whispering Pines Ranch, the air was crisp with the scent of pine and morning dew, the grasslands shimmering with a thin layer of frost that would soon melt under the rising sun. Marcus Sullivan was already up, his boots leaving faint tracks in the damp earth as he hauled a sack of feed toward the barn. His sandy blonde hair, tied back with a leather cord, caught the early light, and his navy blue scarf hung loosely around his neck, a quiet reminder of Sarah. At 52, Marcus moved with the steady rhythm of a man who'd spent his life working the land. But there was a new lightness in his step these past few weeks, a change he hadn't noticed until Victoria Hayes arrived. Inside the cedar house, Victoria stirred from a dreamless sleep, the kind of rest she hadn't known in years. She sat up on the narrow bed, the faded blue and yellow quilt slipping from her shoulders, and ran a hand through her auburn hair, the wooden daisy hairpin still tucked into its waves. Her emerald green eyes took in the small room, the morning light filtering through the window, casting a warm glow on the cedar walls. For the first time since her mother's passing, she felt a flicker of safety, a fragile sense of belonging that she was almost afraid to trust. She slipped into her faded green dress, the hem still frayed, and laced up her scuffed black boots, her movements less guarded than they'd been when she first arrived. The bruises Luther Blackwood had left on her, both the visible ones on her forearm and the deeper ones on her spirit, were starting to fade, replaced by a quiet resolve that grew with each day under Marcus's roof. Marcus was splitting firewood near the barn when Victoria stepped onto the porch, her tattered gray shawl draped over her shoulders, her freckled face catching the morning sun. She hesitated for a moment, then walked toward the patch of wildflowers Marcus had shown her the night before. Goldenrod and lupine, their vibrant yellows and purples a stark contrast to the muted greens of the plains. Kneeling beside them, she ran her fingers over the delicate petals, a small smile tugging at her lips. "My mama used to say wildflowers are the plains' way of smiling," she called out softly, her voice carrying a hint of the girl she might have been before. Luther's cruelty stole her light. Marcus set down his axe, wiping sweat from his brow as he turned to her, his blue eyes softening. "Sarah said something similar," he replied, walking over to join her. "She loved these flowers, used to pick 'em for the table every summer." He crouched beside Victoria, his calloused hand brushing against a lupine stalk. "They've been running wild since she passed. Could use a gentle hand if you're up for it." Victoria nodded, her smile growing a little brighter. "I'd like that," she said, and for the first time Marcus heard a spark of eagerness in her voice, a sign of the healing that was slowly taking root. The days that followed settled into a peaceful rhythm at Whispering Pines Ranch. Victoria threw herself into tending the wildflower patch, weeding out the tangled grass and coaxing the blooms back to life with a tenderness that seemed to come naturally to her. She'd hum softly as she worked, old melodies her mother had taught her, the notes drifting across the plains like a whisper of better times. Marcus found himself pausing in his chores, mending fences, feeding the horses, to listen, the sound of her voice stirring memories of Sarah's laughter. He taught Victoria the small rituals of ranch life, how to scatter feed for the chickens, how to check the horses' hooves for stones, and how to stack firewood so it wouldn't topple in the wind. Each lesson was a thread, weaving them closer, building a bond that felt more like family with every passing day. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery oranges and purples, Marcus and Victoria sat at the kitchen table, a pot of fresh coffee brewing on the stove. The rich aroma filled the air, mingling with the scent of pine from the open window, and the fire in the hearth cast a warm glow across their faces. Victoria sipped her coffee, her hands wrapped around the chipped mug, and glanced at Marcus with a shy smile. "You were right about this ranch," she said softly. It does have a way of healing what's broken." Marcus leaned back in his chair, his blue eyes steady as they met hers. "And you've got a way of bringing it back to life," he replied, his voice gruff but warm. "It's been a long time since these walls heard a song, or saw a smile, like yours." Victoria's cheeks flushed, but her smile held, a fragile but genuine light in her emerald eyes. "I haven't felt safe enough to sing in years," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Not since Mama died. Luther, he didn't like it, said it distracted me from work." Marcus's jaw tightened, a flash of anger crossing his face at the mention of Luther, but he kept his tone gentle. "Well, Luther ain't here," he said firmly. You sing all you want, Victoria. This is your home now. Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears and she nodded, the weight of his words settling over her like a warm blanket. But as the fire crackled and the night deepened, a distant sound broke the quiet, a low, ominous rumble of hooves on the trail, too many to be a lone rider. Marcus's hand stilled on his mug, his gaze sharpening as he glanced toward the window, the starlit plains stretching out beyond. Someone was coming, and in a frontier town like Willow Bend, uninvited visitors at this hour rarely brought good news. Who could be riding toward the ranch under the cover of night, and what trouble might they carry with them? The starlit night over Willow Bend Plains was shattered by the low, ominous rumble of hooves, a sound that sent a chill racing down Marcus Sullivan's spine. He set his coffee mug on the kitchen table with a deliberate calm, his piercing blue, eyes narrowing as he rose and crossed to the window, the firelight casting his shadow long and lean across the cedar floor. Outside, the Montana plains stretched endlessly under a velvet sky, the twinkling stars offering no comfort against the approaching threat. Marcus's sandy blonde hair, tied back with a leather cord, gleamed faintly in the lantern light, and his navy blue scarf hung loose around his neck, a silent reminder of Sarah's strength he'd need now more than ever. The rumble grew louder, a thunder of riders moving with purpose, and Marcus knew this wasn't a friendly visit. In a frontier town like Willow Bend, trouble often came under the cover of darkness. Victoria stood frozen at the table, her emerald green eyes wide with fear, her auburn hair catching the fire's glow as the daisy-carved hairpin slipped slightly from its place. Her tattered gray shawl slipped from her shoulders, revealing the faded green dress beneath, and her hands trembled as she gripped the edge of her chair. The peace she'd found at Whispering Pines Ranch over the past few weeks, the songs she'd sung, the wildflowers she'd tended seemed to vanish like smoke in the wind. "Marcus," she whispered, her voice trembling. Is it him?" She didn't need to say Luther Blackwood's name. The terror in her eyes spoke it for her. "Stay here," Marcus said firmly, his voice a steady anchor in the rising storm. He grabbed his rifle from the rack by the door, the worn wood familiar in his calloused hands, and stepped onto the porch, the lantern light spilling across the weathered boards. The riders emerged from the darkness, 5 men on horseback, their silhouettes stark against the starlit plains. At their head was Luther Blackwood, his hawkish nose and cold black eyes unmistakable even in the dim light, his black gambler's hat tilted at a mocking angle. He wore the same pristine gray suit, but a new addition caught Marcus's eye, a polished revolver gleaming at his hip, a weapon meant for more than show. Beside him rode Sheriff Amos Carter, Luther's cousin, a stocky man with a graying beard and a badge that held more corruption than honor, his beady eyes glinting with malice. "Sullivan," Luther called, his voice a venomous drawl as he reined his horse to a stop a dozen yards from the porch. "I've come for what's mine. Hand over the girl, or I'll take this ranch apart piece by piece." His thin mustache curled into a sneer, and the silver ring on his hand flashed as he gestured toward the house. Sheriff Carter smirked, resting a hand on his own pistol. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be, Marcus," he said, his tone dripping with false concern. "She's Luther's ward, legally his. You've got no claim." Marcus's grip tightened on his rifle, his jaw clenching as he stepped forward, the porch creaking under his boots. "Victoria's not your property, Blackwood," he said, his voice cutting through the night like a blade. "She's 19, not a child, and she made her choice. You've got no right to her, legal or otherwise." His blue eyes burned with a quiet fury, the kind that had earned him a reputation in Willow Bend as a man who didn't bend no matter the odds. Luther's sneer faltered for a moment, but he quickly recovered, his gaze hardening. "I've got papers that say different," he spat. "She's mine till she's 21 or till I say otherwise." Victoria appeared in the doorway, her slender frame trembling but her emerald eyes flashing with defiance. She clutched a small kitchen knife in her hand, its blade gleaming in the lantern light, a testament to the strength she'd found in the weeks at Whispering Pines. "I'm not going back," she said, her voice steady despite the fear in her posture. "You can't make me, Luther, not anymore." Her words rang with a courage Marcus hadn't heard before, and pride swelled in his chest, even as the tension in the air thickened like a gathering storm. Luther's face twisted with rage, his hand twitching toward his revolver. But Sheriff, Carter raised a hand to stop him, his smirk never fading. Now, let's not get messy, Carter said, his tone mockingly calm. We'll give you till dawn to rethink your choice, Sullivan. Hand her over or we'll be back with more men, and a warrant to burn this place to the ground if we have to. The threat hung heavy in the night air, and Luther's cold laugh echoed as the riders turned their horses, disappearing into the darkness as quickly as they'd come. Marcus lowered his rifle but kept his gaze on the trail, his mind already racing. He turned to Victoria, who still stood in the doorway, the knife trembling in her hand. "You did good standing up like that," he said, his voice softening as he stepped toward her. "But they'll be back, and we need to be ready." Victoria nodded, her freckled face pale but determined. "What do we do?" she asked, her voice a mix of fear and resolve. "We prepare," Marcus replied, his blue eyes steady as he placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "I've got friends in these parts, men who owe me, men who hate the Blackwoods as much as we do. We'll call him in, fortify the ranch, and make sure Luther knows he's picked the wrong fight." He led her back inside, the fire casting a warm glow over them as he pulled out a map of the valley, his mind already mapping out their defense. But as the night stretched on, with the distant howl of a coyote echoing over the plains, what new challenges would dawn bring to Whispering Pines Ranch? Dawn broke over Willow Bend Plains with a fiery intensity, the sun rising above the Bitterroot Mountains in a blaze of crimson and gold, as if the sky itself sensed the battle to come. At Whispering Pines Ranch, the air was thick with tension, the grasslands shimmering under a thin layer of morning dew. Marcus Sullivan stood on the porch, his piercing blue eyes scanning the horizon, his sandy blonde hair tied back with a leather cord, the navy blue scarf around his neck a quiet talisman of Sarah's courage. His rifle rested against his shoulder, and a determined set to his jaw spoke of a man ready to defend what mattered most. In the past week, he'd called in every favor owed to him, rallying a small but fierce band of allies to stand against Luther Blackwood's threat. Victoria Hayes emerged from the house, her emerald green eyes blazing with a resolve that had grown steadily over her time at the ranch. Her auburn hair was pulled back with the daisy-carved hairpin, a symbol of her mother's love, and she wore her faded green dress with a newfound confidence, her scuffed black boots planted firmly on the porch. In her hands she held a small pistol Marcus had taught her to use, her grip steady despite the faint tremble in her fingers. The bruises Luther had left on her spirit were fading, replaced by a fire forged in the safety of Whispering Pines, a fire that wouldn't let her be a victim again. The rumble of hooves echoed across the plains louder than the night before, as Luther Blackwood and Sheriff Amos Carter rode into view with a dozen armed men, their horses kicking up dust in a menacing cloud. Luther's cold black eyes glinted with malice, his black gambler's hat casting a shadow over his hawkish face, and his silver ring flashed as he raised a hand to signal his men. Beside him, Carter's badge gleamed mockingly, his graying beard framing a sneer. "Time's up, Sullivan," Luther shouted, his voice a venomous snarl. "Give me the girl or we'll burn this place to ash." Marcus stepped forward, his boots steady on the porch, his voice cutting through the morning air like a whip. "You'll have to go through me first, Blackwood," he said, his tone icy with resolve. "Victoria's not yours to claim. She never was." Luther's sneer twisted into a scowl, but before he could reply, Victoria spoke, her voice ringing with a strength that stopped him cold. "I'm done running, Luther," she said, her emerald eyes locked on his. "This is my home now, and I'll fight for it." The words carried the weight of her transformation, a testament to the courage Marcus had helped her find. Luther's face darkened, and he drew his polished revolver with a vicious snarl. "So be it," he spat, and the first shot rang out, shattering the morning stillness. Marcus dove to the side, pulling Victoria behind a stack of firewood as bullets whizzed past, splintering the porch railing. From the barn, Marcus's allies emerged like shadows. Tom Red Harper, a grizzled trapper with a scar across his cheek, his rifle booming. Eliza Liz Monroe, a sharpshooter with raven black hair, her shots precise and deadly, and Caleb Finch, a quiet blacksmith whose hammer had been traded for a shotgun. They'd all come because they believed in Marcus's cause, because they'd seen Luther's cruelty in Willow Bend and refused to let it stand. The battle raged across the ranch, a whirlwind of gunfire and shouts, the air thick with the acrid scent of gunpowder. Marcus returned fire from behind the firewood, his shots forcing Luther's men to scatter, while Victoria took aim with her pistol, her hands steady as she clipped a rider's shoulder, sending him tumbling from his horse. "Stay low," Marcus shouted, his voice a lifeline amidst the chaos, and Victoria nodded, her freckled face set with determination. Red's rifle took down 2 more of Luther's men, and Liz's sharpshooting pinned Carter behind a boulder, his badge no shield against her skill. Caleb charged forward, his shotgun roaring, driving the attackers back with sheer force. Luther, seeing his men falter, spurred his horse forward, his revolver blazing as he aimed for Marcus. But Victoria saw him first, her emerald eyes narrowing. As she fired her pistol, the bullet grazing Luther's arm and forcing him to drop his weapon. He cursed, clutching his wound, his cold eyes burning with rage as he wheeled his horse around. "This ain't over, Sullivan," he bellowed, but his voice cracked with fear as he fled, his remaining men following in a chaotic retreat, leaving Carter behind, wounded and disarmed. The dust settled over Whispering Pines, the morning sun, casting a golden glow over the battered ranch. Marcus rose, his scarf still tied firmly, and helped Victoria to her feet, pride shining in his blue eyes. "You were incredible," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I knew you had fight, in you." Victoria's lips curved into a small, triumphant smile, her auburn hair falling loose around her face. "I learned from the best," she replied, her voice steady now, the pistol still warm in her hand. But as they surveyed the ranch, the splintered porch, the bullet-scarred barn, Marcus's gaze lingered on the trail where Luther had fled. He knew a man like that wouldn't give up so easily, not while his pride still burned. What final reckoning would Luther bring, and how would it test the family Marcus and Victoria had built? Autumn arrived in Willow Bend Plains with a quiet grace, the grasslands turning a burnished gold under the crisp Montana sky, the Bitterroot Mountains standing proud against a backdrop of fiery reds and oranges. Whispering Pines Ranch stood stronger than ever, its cedar walls weathered but resolute, the barn rebuilt with the help of Marcus Sullivan's loyal allies, Red Harper, Liz Monroe, and Caleb Fink, who'd stayed on through the harvest to ensure the homestead thrived. The wildflower patch Victoria Hayes had tended so carefully now bloomed in a riot of goldenrod and lupine, their vibrant hues a testament to the healing that had taken root in this sacred place. It had been 6 months since the battle with Luther Blackwood, and the echoes of that fiery dawn had finally faded into a hard-won peace. Marcus stood on the porch, his sandy blonde hair streaked with more gray now, tied back with a leather cord, his navy blue scarf fluttering in the breeze, a keepsake from Sarah that had seen him through the darkest days. At 52, his piercing blue eyes held a softer light, the kind that came from finding purpose after years of grief. He watched Victoria as she knelt in the wildflower patch, her auburn hair catching the morning sun, the daisy-carved hairpin a quiet tribute to her mother. Her emerald green eyes sparkled with joy as she gathered a bouquet, her faded green dress replaced by a new one in soft blue. A gift from Liz, who'd become a sister to her in the months since the fight. Victoria's scuffed black boots were now paired with a sturdy new pair, and her freckled face glowed with a confidence that had been unimaginable when Marcus first found her outside Carter's saloon. The threat of Luther Blackwood was a distant memory. After fleeing the ranch, he'd been spotted in a Bozeman gambling den, where his temper and debts caught up with him. Word was he'd been run out of Montana for good, his reputation in tatters, his power broken. Sheriff Amos Carter, stripped of his badge after the territorial marshal investigated his corruption, had left Willow Bend in disgrace, leaving the town to breathe easier under a new lawman who valued justice over greed. Marcus and Victoria had faced their final reckoning not with guns, but with the unshakable bond they'd forged. A family built not by blood but by choice, love, and the courage to stand for what was right. Inside the house, the kitchen was, alive with warmth, the scent of fresh apple pie filling the air as Victoria set the table for a special occasion. It was her 20th birthday, a milestone Marcus insisted on celebrating, the first true celebration she'd had since her mother's passing. The table was adorned with the wildflower bouquet, and a small wooden box sat beside her plate. A gift Marcus had carved himself, etched with a simple daisy to match her hairpin. Victoria opened it with a gasp, revealing a delicate silver locket, a treasure Sarah had once worn. "It's for you," Marcus said, his voice gruff with emotion. "Sarah would have wanted you to have it. You've brought this place back to life, Victoria. Brought me back to life." Tears shimmered in Victoria's emerald eyes as she fastened the locket around her neck, her fingers tracing the daisy carving. "I never thought I'd find a home again," she said softly, her voice thick with gratitude. "You gave me that, Marcus. You gave me a family." Marcus's blue eyes softened, and he reached across the table to squeeze her hand, his calloused fingers warm against hers. "You're my daughter in every way that matters," he said, his tone leaving no room for doubt. "Blood don't make a family, girl. Love does. And I love you like you were my own." The day unfolded with laughter and light, Red, Liz, and Caleb joining them for a feast of pie, roasted venison, and stories that echoed through the cedar walls. Victoria had grown into a woman of quiet strength, her songs now a regular melody at Whispering Pines, her hands skilled in tending the wildflowers and helping Marcus with the cattle that had begun to fill the pastures again. She'd even started sketching the plains, her drawings capturing the beauty of the Montana landscape, a talent Marcus encouraged with a set of pencils he'd bartered for in town. As the sun set, painting the sky in shades of amber and violet, Victoria stood on the porch, her locket gleaming, and looked out over the land that had become her sanctuary. Marcus joined her, his scarf catching the evening breeze, and they shared a quiet moment, two souls who'd found each other in the darkness and built a legacy of love. This story of Marcus and Victoria reminds us of a truth often forgotten in the rugged history of the American West. Family isn't just about blood. It's about the choices we make, the love we give, and the courage to stand by those who need us most. In the late 19th century, frontier life was harsh, with towns like Willow Bend often ruled by corrupt men like Luther Blackwood. But it was also a time of resilience where communities came together to protect their own, as Marcus and his allies did, reflecting the real spirit of the West, a spirit of hope, grit, and love that endures in stories like these. What moved you most about Marcus and Victoria's journey? Was it their quiet moments of healing, the battle that tested their resolve, or the family they built against all odds? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear what resonated with you. If you're new here, welcome to our channel, where we bring you the best in Western romance and prairie love legends. Tales of courage, love, and new beginnings. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss a story. For our returning viewers, thank you for being part of this journey. Your support keeps these tales alive. Where are you watching from today? Drop your raw location in the comments and let's see how far these stories of hope travel. Until next time, remember, sometimes the greatest legacy we leave is the love we choose to give.